are you clear on the legal authority, whether it actually exists, that's being claimed by the White House to send those 700 active duty Marines into the state of California?
I don't think the legal authority exists, and it's not clear that the administration has even articulated the basis under which they're doing this. First, they said they were relying for the countermanding of the governor by calling out the National Guard on Title X authorities, which require the president to go through the governor, not around the governor, not over the governor, but also require things like rebellion, which are clearly not in evidence here. He has also relied sort of generically on his Article II power as commander-in-chief. Again, there are laws, and the Constitution does not permit the president to call out the military against citizens of the United States or to call out the military for law enforcement purposes. They keep throwing around the term insurrection because they may want to rely on the Insurrection Act, but they hope these highly charged terms like rebellion, like insurrection, can put some kind of legal gloss on the lawlessness of their actions. And Chris, I think it all comes down to something the mayor pointed out quite rightly, and that is the president betrayed the promise that he would focus on violent criminals who were here unlawfully. He hasn't done that. He's resorted to these indiscriminate raids of workplaces, increasingly, I fear, outside of farms, traffic stops, the Home Depot, grabbing citizens and non-citizens alike, and prompting protest, which you would expect. And because I think this playbook will repeat around the country, it's important we recognize this playbook Trump is using. Once there are protests, and there are always going to be some violent agitators, and, you know, violence has no place in this. It ought to be condemned. It is condemned. Anybody using violence should be arrested and prosecuted. But the president wants these confrontations so that he can call out the military in other cities in America as part of his would-be dictator playbook. And we need to be aware of what we're seeing in L.A., this abuse of the military, we are likely to see everywhere.
Do you think there's reporting about sending tactical units to a variety of cities that are run by Democratic governors, that this is essentially a kind of provocation, that they're trying to recreate conditions of, you know, the 2020 protests we saw in George Floyd and produce a kind of casus belli for larger crackdowns?
I do think this is part of what they aim to do. I mean, this administration began with the pardoning of hundreds of people who attacked police officers. So in order to somehow reestablish their credentials as a law enforcement party when they betrayed law enforcement in the president's first acts in office, they want to somehow create this confrontation. I think they would be delighted if it were a nationwide confrontation where they can somehow claim they're the party of law and order when they are, in fact, the party of chaos and disorder. But I think that's part of what they're trying to achieve. We need to keep speaking out in favor of peaceful protest against any kind of violence directed at law enforcement, but also against abusing the military this way. We in California, like in most states, love our National Guard. They're there for us in wind and fire and hurricane and flood. We cherish our relationship with the Guard. Likewise, we have the greatest respect for the Marine Corps, and we don't want to see those forces abused in this way. It would only erode public trust in those important institutions.
The president, of course, has broken with tradition to create this unprecedented military parade in peacetime on Saturday in Washington, D.C. It's also his birthday. He threatened today explicitly the use of, quote, I quote him here, very heavy force against, quote, protesters. The protesters of this would be met with very heavy force. What do you think of that?
Well, you know, this is kind of classic would-be strongman kind of talk. He wants a military parade on his birthday. It's going to cost us over $40 million for that. They're wasting over $140 million on this deployment of the National Guard when it wasn't necessary in Los Angeles. This abuse of taxpayer resources, this abuse of the military, this use of the military to provoke a confrontation that apparently the president wants because he is just relishing a fight. We have to recognize it for what it is. In addition to a terrible abuse of military power, It is also degrading our military readiness in terms of threats around the world. But also, it's a distraction from the fact he hasn't done what he promised in lowering prices. He hasn't done anything to improve the.
And joining me now is Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. Mayor, it's great to have you on the program. Thank you for making time.
Thank you for having me on, Chris.
First, just where do you see things at this moment as I speak to you around 5 o'clock local time in California?
Well, let me just say that so far we have not been notified of any raids that took place today, and understand that that is a catalyst for just about everything that is happening. But over the last few days, there's 7 raids, one day, 3, 4, 5. It has just created a sense of fear and uncertainty in our city. People wondering whether they should go to work, whether they should go to school.
What has the effect been in terms of the functioning of the folks that live in the community you represent to have these raids happening? And as I understand it, at parking lots, Home Depots and workplaces, among targeting essentially random people who are, working or going about their day.
Well, and let me just tell you, let's go back to what we were told in the beginning. This was going to be gang members, violent criminals, drug dealers. And I have a hard time imagining that's who is in a Home Depot parking lot. In our city, we have day labor structures where people are not just hanging out. And so they were waiting. And day laborers are people who work every single day. They seek employment day after day. They are just trying to survive. And to have them being chased through a parking lot, or to have an office be raided where the family members are calling home saying, hey, I think I'm going to be detained. And then the family shows up with small children and they watch their parents be carted off, and then they can't contact them. They don't know where they are. The people that are detained have no legal representation or no access to legal representation. And from the immigrant rights community, which is a very well-developed, established community in Los Angeles, this is a serious departure from the way things were handled in the past.
The Deputy Chief of Staff of the White House, Stephen Miller, I want to say he has been talking about essentially you and the governor as guilty of essentially insurrection. He keeps using that word, and I want to read to you something he said about you. He said, Mayor again sides with the insurrection mob, tells ICE to abandon the city. Mayor Bass thinks it's shameful to defend the lives of ICE officers performing their constitutional duties, but not shameful that California spends billions subsidizing and rewarding the illegal alien invasion. What do you say to that?
I think it's a despicable comment. The way that our city has been characterized as hordes of migrants that have taken over our city, we're crime-ridden and civil unrest everywhere, is just a despicable characterization for the city that in 12 months is going to be hosting the World Cup. And we are a city of immigrants. There are a lot of sectors of our economy that are completely dependent on immigrant labor. Try the construction industry, where people say that 40% of the construction workers are Latino. I would venture to say that it's a lot more than that. In some areas, it's more like 90%. And so when you hit an occupation or industries like that, the childcare industry, the women who are working in homes, the gardeners who are landscaping, the small business owners who are documented or undocumented, but all of them are contributing to our economy. And so if you create a sense of terror in that sector of our city, then you are going to impact the overall quality of life and economy in our city. I was talking to someone today who said they went to their grocery store and there were shelves that were empty because the people were afraid to come to work and stock the shelves. That's the impact of having raids that are just completely unnecessary.
Since you just referenced this, I want to play you something the president said about Los Angeles. I asked you about the Stephen Miller quote, and I don't want to engage too much back and forth, but the president is directing some significant resources and rhetorical fire at your city. Here's what he had to say about Los Angeles earlier today in front of active duty troops at Fort Bragg.
Within the span of a few decades, Los Angeles has gone from being one of the cleanest, safest, and most beautiful cities on earth to being a trash heap with entire neighborhoods under the control of transnational gangs and criminal networks. It's horrible.
What do you think of that?
I have no idea where he's talking about. It is not Los Angeles. I will tell you that when I look at some of the footage of what is happening, you can get the sense that there is civil unrest happening citywide. I have to tell you that the vandalism and the protest that you are looking at is taking place in several streets, individual streets in the downtown area. It is not even all of downtown. And so to depict our entire city this way, or to characterize our city that our city is under duress, is just not accurate. If you go 1 or 2 miles in either direction, you don't know that anything is happening at all. We do not need federal troops. You want to talk about resources, it's my understanding that the federal government is preparing to pay $130 million to bring troops in a city where nothing is happening that would warrant their being here. That's $130 million that our city could use in preparing for the World Cup.
My understanding, final question for you, is you're considering proactively declaring some kind of curfew. Is that right? And if things aren't so bad, then why?
If things aren't so bad, I mean, yes, we are looking at a curfew because of the vandalism that took place. And last night, several businesses were broken into. The point is, though, is that we can handle this. This is a city that is well used to protests. And one of the protests that the president was bragging about was Saturday night, when there were about 120 protesters out. There was some violence. 20 of them were arrested. LAPD and adjacent law enforcement agencies.
A president acting like this is not strength, it's weakness. It's weakness. Just because the president has a power, they don't look strong for using it. A premature use of force like we're seeing from Trump is a sign of cowardice, it's a sign of weakness, it's a sign of fear, and it's a sign of desperation. And so, in that sense, as 99.99% of the protesters are peaceful, as there are far more people singing and dancing and marching and cheering and praying and socializing and being together, Donald sends the military. And I'm not going to, it's not J6 where he's sending his thugs. That was bad. This is worse in many ways because he's taking people who just want to serve their country. And most of them don't want to be there. That's my speculation, to be fair. But I'm guessing most of them don't want to be there. Most of them don't want to be, trying to oppress their neighbor, engaging in First Amendment activity on a very important issue. Not everyone's going to agree, but this is First Amendment activity. Donald loses here because what he's shown is he's not man enough. And I'm not trying to be too gendered about it. But you know what I mean? Like, he's not man enough. He's not grown up enough to wield this power. He doesn't have the intestinal fortitude and, fortitude below the belt to have this power and use it responsibly. And these protesters, not through the random little acts that the media has overblown, but through the act of joyful, righteous protest, have won in showing the world who's right and who's wrong.